Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 4. Do I really have to love everyone?
Including flabby wrestlers. In that moment, do I feel like loving them? Ahead of you.
Stand it when people jump in, wait your blinking turn. Who actually deserves that and who doesn't? And we make ourselves judge and jury, which is a dangerous place to be. And I feel emotional even talking about it. He just spoke truth into this person's life, started saying how he was valuable, how he was loved.
This is absolutely linked to your hopes, your dreams, your destiny, your legacy.
Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 4.
We're back again, and we are looking forward to having a conversation with one another and with yourselves.
Absolutely. Are you all right today?
I am doing fine. I am raring to go.
Good.
I had one of those mornings where you wake up and, you know, the thing that you love to do feels, for some reason, like it's a hard task. Do you ever get that contradictory feeling?
Yeah, all the time.
It's strange, isn't it? Because it's like, I love to do this. So why does it feel like something I don't want to do? It's a weird thing.
I do. I get that a lot. I do. I had the kind of opposite morning where I was awake from about 4:20, 4:30. Could not get back to sleep, even though I wanted to go back to sleep.
Again, another thing that you really wanted to do, but you couldn't do.
Couldn't do it. And
There's a theme.
Yeah, my brain was wide awake, which isn't usual for that time of the morning. You're the kind of person that's normally awake early and bright. I take a while to warm up, but I was wide awake. But then did the stupid thing of half an hour before my alarm went off. What happens? Go back to sleep.
Ooh, fatal.
So then when that alarm goes
snooze.
off, it is painful then when the alarm goes off. Even that 30 minutes, I was like, why couldn't I have done this at 4 a.m?
And when you're in the winter months, the duvet increases in weight like 100-fold. So like it pins you down. It's like a big flabby wrestler.
Not that you've ever been underneath a big flabby wrestler.
Not that I'm aware of.
We need to move on really quickly because I feel like the conversation is taking a nosedive before we've even begun.
Well, flabby wrestlers aside, let's move on.
That is not a nice way to talk about me.
Although it could link to our question.
It could indeed.
Because you might not have a particular affinity for big flabby wrestlers. But the question is...
So episode 4, the question is, do I really have to love everyone?
Including flabby wrestlers.
Do I really have to love everyone? What a question.
It is a good question, isn't it? And there's a big reason behind this question because really, we on this podcast, I guess, we look at these questions, which are the everyday questions that everyday people ask. So we're all on the same kind of level playing field. We all ask these things. But really what we're trying to do is go under the bonnet of our lives to really look at, I guess, the engine room. Like, what is it that drives us to make the choices that we make? What causes our emotions? And we're going to talk about emotions in this session. Because very often, whether I want to love somebody or not is often, if we're all honest, driven by emotion. In that moment, do I feel like loving them? And it's really important to ask ourselves the question, are we happy with that way of operating? And does that allow us to operate at our very best?
True.
Because ultimately, if we have hopes and dreams and firmly believe that people tuning in to this podcast, when you call the podcast The Winning Life, then you're not really inviting, or you're not, people who aren't who are listening are wanting to win. They're not wanting to just settle.
Yeah.
And so therefore, you know, you really want to know, how do I live at my optimum? How do I operate at my highest and my best? And so really this question is a huge question.
It is a big question because we're not saying, do I really have to love everyone that I know? Do I really have to love everyone that I work with? We're not talking about like a group of people. We're talking about everyone.
All inclusive.
It's an absolute word.
The person who cuts you up on the road.
Oh, that's tough.
Ooh, the person who jumps in the queue
That's even worse.
At the theme park.
That I
Ahead
can't
of you.
stand it when people jump in, wait your blinking turn.
I'm actually provoking some memories in Leanne, because I've seen Leanne when she has seen people jump the queue.
It's because I'm a justice carrier. Carrier of justice. So that's what it is. But also we can go, there's joking things like that. But then what about people who've actually really hurt you?
Yeah.
What about people who have, accidentally hurt you? And what about those who've deliberately hurt you? Do we really, really have to love those? Because I think we need to break the question down a little bit before we can answer it, because it's a massive question. And
break it down.
I'm going to break it down because I think in the few minutes that we have, we'll never be able to cover everything. But we can answer something. So to break it down, I think really, first of all, we have to ask ourselves the question, what is our understanding of love? Because if that is the verb, the doing word, a little bit of an English lesson here for you. If that is the key word here about loving, what do we believe love really is? When it says you have to love everyone, because like you said, we can act on emotion and feeling. And in society, in general, love will always be described as a feeling, first and foremost. It's everywhere. I love doing that. I love that person. I really love them. I love that food. Or I feel love towards. So it's an emotion, it's a feeling. But we want to perhaps look at something a little bit different about true love. It comes down to something far deeper than just an emotion or feeling. And emotions and feelings are part of it, because obviously
100%.
You love me, don't you?
Oh, of course I do.
Thank you. And I love you. But I'm sure there's times when I've tested
I'm just allowing you into our little intimate moment.
We are married, for those of you who don't know that, and have been for almost 23 years this year. And you still love me.
That's it.
That is a miracle in and of itself. But there are times that I'm sure, like you do with me, test that love. But that is where it goes beyond the feeling and the emotion, and that feelings are important. And we talked about this in a previous episode. They are real experiences, but they're not necessarily real explanations of what is going on. And that's important to remember, that in that moment when you really irritate me, which isn't very often.
It's one of my skills.
Then, it's putting that love to the test. But then, like we said, we can look even deeper to people who've been really hurt. And perhaps that person has not asked for forgiveness, not said sorry. Do we really have to love them? Absolutely.
And I guess what we're really getting down to then is, what is love? So for me, in answering that question, and I probably maybe used 2 or 3 different ways of explaining it, but the first one that comes to mind is, even before love is a verb, it's a value.
Good.
It's a value.
Brilliant.
I believe, and this is where our faith kind of creates this worldview, that first and foremost, our intrinsic essence as human beings is loving. Now, the fact that we can do things that look completely the opposite to love does not change that initial intrinsic value, that value that is there by design. So if we are created in the image of a loving God, then that is our value. And so a value is a belief. And in the Winning Conversation, Winning Keys, so this is the book that I've written that kind of really unpacks this a whole lot more, which we're not going to go to book. Thank you very much.
That's all right.
We're not going to go to the lengths of doing that in this podcast, but we look at the fact that as human beings, there are 4 parts to us. We are spirit, soul, mind, and body, in that order. And we use 4 concentric circles, spirit being the core piece. And the soul, the second concentric circle, is our emotion. And that's the part that we naturally operate out of, because we feel it. It grabs our attention. When we feel the anger towards somebody and we don't feel like loving them, then that's because emotion gets our attention straight away. It is our default setting. But our belief is what we choose to believe. And sometimes that can be against our feelings. So even at the start of this session, we talked about the fact that when I woke up this morning, I love to do this. And yet the thought of doing it felt hard.
Yeah.
It's almost like there was a competition between my spirit, I really want to do this, and my soul. Why don't I feel like doing this? And in that moment, I need to decide, what is it that I'm going to choose to love?
Good.
Because actually, if I'd have believed my emotions, which felt very, very real, actually they weren't true, because it wasn't a true reflection of what I actually valued. And so I think in life we can often operate out of that emotion, and it's actually not congruent with who we are.
Yeah.
And then when we don't have that congruency, in other words, there's a jarring between what I feel and then act upon versus what I actually believe to be true, that's when that's the start of a losing conversation. That's the start of a negative internal downward spiral. And so let me lay it out there straight away. For me, love is our intrinsic value, and therefore it's a platform from which we operate each day.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. That's the platform from which we operate each day, because I truly believe that unless we learn, and it is something we have to teach ourselves, it doesn't come naturally necessarily, unless we learn to love everyone, place value on people, etc., we will never have the impact that we are designed to have and created to have. Because if our belief is, I can't love everyone and not everyone deserves my love, and actually there might be a point in that, not everybody does deserve it. We don't deserve everyone else's love, so it comes around full circle. But if we have that belief, it will impact our beliefs, therefore it will impact how we outwork our lives, because I won't go and help somebody if I believe they're not worth it. So suddenly we hold ourselves to a very strange set of laws, who actually deserves that and who doesn't, and we make ourselves judge and jury, which is a dangerous place to be. So in order to have that true impact that we are created to have, we have to learn to love everyone. And you've said this before, our love, in the book you've said this, our love has to be led by belief.
Yeah.
That is the key thing, because you are being led by the core of who you are rather than how you might feel on a given day. It also makes us very superficial human beings if one day we're full of love for somebody and the next day we can't stand them. And then within that, which is a bigger topic, but the whole point of forgiveness and love, I believe, is not so much about the other person, it is about us. And you don't have to be a Christian to talk about this. People talk about that all the time. Forgiveness is important because, if you don't forgive them, it's only harming yourself. Even people who don't believe in God believe that. But when you are a Christian, there is something that's really weighty behind that, because God forgave me, the unforgivable person. And I didn't even ask for forgiveness, and he forgave me and sent his one and only son to die for me. So that's my basis and my platform for thinking, how dare I say I will not love somebody or will not forgive them when I've received that? So that's the kind of the cycle and the pattern. That's
good.
And the belief that I live from.
No, it's really good. And I think asking yourself the question, okay, do I believe that my true core self is loving? And if the answer to that is yes, and that's my desire, that's what I want to be, then, like you said, to almost apportion that, I'm going to love this person and not love that person, means I'm immediately living two lives. There's two versions of me.
Sorry to interrupt, but just to let you know that in every episode, Gareth and Leanne will be talking about the importance of getting a plan for your personal and professional life. That's why they've developed the MVP plan. When you develop your MVP plan, surprising opportunities and uncommon results follow. Visit thewinninglife.tv today to get access to your plan and the steps on how to use it. Let's head right back over to their episode.
You see, a value is a value that is from the inside out. So, and this is where we tend to, I believe, misunderstand love. In other words, whether I love you or not is based upon what you do to me. or how you make me feel. In other words, we treat love as if it's it's determined by external stimulus. Now that sounds a very scientific word, but it's essentially things that are on the outside determine whether I'm going to love them or not.
Yeah.
And if you apply that principle across the board to your values, you will be living 2 or more versions of yourself. And again, it's a biblical principle. And as we say on this podcast, this isn't just for Christians, but these are principles that can be tried and tested. And you don't have to be a believer to accept principles that are true. And so one of the principles, I think it's from the letter of James, says, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. In other words, if you are in 2 minds based upon having 2 value systems, you're going to be unstable.
Yeah. You're
going to be unstable. You're going to be turning up one day and you're going to be like, well, why am I not turning out today like I was yesterday? And this affects a performance because, people try to be consistent in performance, whether that's work performance, sporting performance, business, being a consistent mum, a consistent dad, whatever it is, consistent friend. The reason why we lack consistency is because we're operating out of 2 identities. And love is that central point from which, if I choose each day, I believe I am love. For us, that's because I'm made in the image of a loving God. But if I believe that I am love, therefore I am going to choose to value people. Now, again, like you said, that doesn't mean that I am validating everybody's behavior and I'm saying, well, therefore I'm just going to ignore the fact that you've done wrong, or I'm going to ignore the fact that, something needs dealing with. It's not about burying heads in sand and living this kind of utopian existence. No. It's about saying, I'm going to choose to find the value in every person, regardless of their response to me or my perception. And sometimes it very, very often is perception. Even when we're out driving and that person cuts us up, we think they're in the wrong, but actually maybe we didn't see, or we were unaware of maybe how we were creating confusion with our driving. And, again, it's so often just perception. So I need to have a central point that I keep coming back to. I am love, therefore I'm going to choose to find the value. And imagine, like in the world in which we live now, which just, I'm not sure the world right now is becoming more and more, what's the opposite to harmonious?
Acrimonious.
Acrimonious. That was definitely not the word that I was thinking of, but I was thinking like disharmony, but or unharmonious. But I don't
living at odds with one another.
Yeah, it feels like we're more at odds with one another, but I think actually we live in an age now where just all of that's being amplified.
Yeah, true.
Because we can all hear, see, tweet, message, etc. But I think the reason, imagine if everybody made the decision, let's live from a place of love. Let's choose to value, not based upon how I feel, but what I know, the person I want to be each day.
That's interesting, because if you are on any form of social media platform or whatever, the essence behind the majority of conversation is the opposite of love. It's quite hateful. So I think on the surface, everyone's like, oh, cheering you on, love you, whatever. But it's so fake, because actually, why do we get things like trolls, people online, they're called trolls. Obviously, I'm not calling them that. That's what people call them, who pull up their sometimes sickeningly awful comments that actually have caused people to take their own lives or harm themselves or remove their voice from the public platform. And because the kind of the theme and the heart behind it is actually hatred. It's not love. Because I would dare to say that those people are being led by their belief, which is actually, I don't even love myself, so I'm not going, how can I love other people? And that might be quite an audacious statement to make, but I truly believe you can't love other people well until you have learned to value yourself. How can you put a value on life if you don't even value your own? So very often those people who say those comments are struggling with something in their own security or their own understanding, or they might see something in their lives that they want and think, I'll never have that, so therefore what comes out is venom. And sometimes, particularly online and things like that, maybe you've been the subject of this stuff, on email or on social media, whatever, where you've experienced it, and it can be quite a difficult thing, because you want people to love you, and that's where this kind of reciprocal thing comes in, where I want to love, but I want to be loved, because let's be honest, that's how God created us, to love and be loved. But let's get that in the right order. It's love first, then be loved after. Not once I'm loved, then I'll show love back. Could you imagine if the world operated purely like that?
Oh yeah,
which
absolutely.
Some people do, but it would be a very lonely place to be. Essentially, when you enter into any relationship, even our relationship at the start, there's a risk, you know.
Is there?
There was a risk.
I thought I was a dead cert.
Well, you know, yeah, exactly.
No, I'm joking.
But there was a risk, you know, in, is he going to love me back?
Yeah.
You know, maybe you thought, or maybe you just thought there was no way that I couldn't love you. You know, you thought, maybe, is she going to love me back? There's always a risk with love, but that's where people get hurt, pull back and go, oh, no, I'm not going to get into that again. I'm not going to allow myself to be hurt. We build walls around our heart, walls around our emotions, around who we are, our beliefs, and it's quite a lonely place to be. But that is not, and the reason why it's difficult is because that is not our design, and when you're living against your design, it hurts.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. You've got to make a decision, right? I can't control somebody else's response to me. Even, let's talk about ourselves. So when we made the decision to, you know, commit ourselves for life to one another, of course, there's always a risk or a chance that doesn't, both sides don't commit to that long term, or something happens and then somebody changes their mind. There's always that risk, but all you can control is who you're going to be in that relationship. You can't control the other person. Yeah. And the image that came to mind, or the situation that came to mind, has this happened to you?
I'm nervous now.
Don't you shut me nervous. So have you ever walked down the street or walked down a narrow corridor, and you were on one side and somebody else was on the same side as you? And then the closer you get, you're thinking, am I going to move to the right and then let them keep on their course? Or am I going to... It happens when you're running.
When I was running this morning, and I was like, we were both kind of coming to the same point. It was that awkward moment of like, I dodged out the way, but they did too. And then you have that awkward stand of like, oh, sorry. And then the dog's like, is this a game?
That's it.
Awkward.
It's what I call the awkward dance. It's like, oh, I'm not quite sure. Oh, after you. Oh, silly me.
It is awkward, especially, you've just come face to face with them, and you're trying to read that person's mind.
And it's like, are they going to go, or am I going to go? Are they going to go, and am I going to go? And it's a bit like that when it comes to love. Again, it comes back down to, well, if I'm almost trying to guess what their choice is going to be, because my choice is going to be based upon their choice, then you've got this awkward dance. And any relationship where the basis of it is, well, my response is going to be based upon your response. We are not living from the inside out. It's an unstable relationship, whether that's a business relationship, a client relationship, a family relationship, a friendship. You to simplify life, it's just to say, well, this is who I'm going to be, and I'm going to be congruent. And sometimes I'll fall short of that standard, but I'm going to choose to live from that place each day, believing that as I live according to my values, those values are going to filter my relationships. So actually, will all the people that I start off with today be the same people in 10 years' time? Probably not. And really, you attract the level of value that you carry throughout your life. So you will attract people whose values are congruent with your values. Maybe people started off congruent, but over time, they decide to violate their values or change. And so, but all you can do is say, hey, do you know what? This is who I'm going to be. I'm going to choose to live from this position. And that avoids the awkward dances and the kind of indecision of, should I make that decision? Shouldn't I make that decision? And I think, again, when it comes back down to relationships, whether that's a marriage, whether that's a business relationship, whether that's a team, it's about saying, because again, what happens is we almost try and change the people, you know, to try and make them more like us, and then I'll love them, or I'm going to love them because I believe I can alter their attitude, or I can alter, you know, their choices. No, what happens is we have to say, you know, our relationship, let's talk about again ourselves, is based upon a set of common values, and those values are going to be the umpire. Those values are going to be the adjudicator. And actually, we are going to go to work according to those values and believing that those values will change us rather than the other person needing to change me.
Yeah, and then I think whichever situation you're in, whether you're in with people that you are familiar with and you know really well, right from your family, then to your like work colleagues or friends, but then it also has to remain the same even with people you don't know, which is even more difficult, I think, because they've really not done anything to deserve it. But I think how you are with one set of friends or people needs to be exactly the same with another. Obviously, we're not talking about, I'm not going to be the same with a stranger as I am to you, but in the level of value, that person still has to feel value from me, you know, regardless of what's happened. I think of an instance, I watched something online a little while ago. Somebody was on the recording it. I was on the street. I think it was on TikTok. I watched it. And he was just sharing stuff on the street, and this guy came at him, was full of anger and just shouting in his face. And it was like, how dare you? Don't know him, you know, right up in his face. And this guy, who was a Christian, now, if it was me, I've got to say I'd have struggled. I'd have probably said something back. But what we're talking about, he showed absolute love and value for this guy. And instead of being up in his face back or saying, shut up, and he didn't even walk away, he just started to say really amazing things about this guy that he'd never met. And I feel emotional even talking about it. He just spoke truth into this person's life, started to say how he was valuable, how he was loved. And gradually, this guy who was full of hatred, I mean, it was quite violent, began to back down. And after a period of time, this video was quite long. By the end, this guy was crying, the one who'd been quite hurtful, and they ended up embracing. Now, they probably don't still agree, and they were probably not friends or anything like that. But it just showed me the power of true, unconditional love. Was far more powerful than the hate or the angst or whatever in that moment. When it's real, true love, when it's agape love, as we talk about in the Bible, which is unconditional love, it is so incredibly powerful.
And I think, you know, each day to make that decision, you know, I'm not going to operate out of feeling. I'm going to operate out of that value. And I'm going to choose to see the value in the person that I believe is there. Now, the behavior, like you've said, in that situation, it may be difficult to find because you've got layers of attitude and visceral kind of, just angst. And you've just got to say, I believe this person is valuable. I believe that, hurt people hurt. And therefore, what I'm probably seeing towards me is almost a replay of something that has happened in their past. And then when you start to, because you experience the person that you believe that they are, so again, two people can have two different experiences of the same person, but very often it's the lens through which we're seeing that person. So if I see through the lens of love, and again, this isn't to say you excuse behavior and we can just allow people to do anything they want. No. Please don't, misunderstand us. Not at all. No. But who I choose to see and to value the person based upon my value, because your value, and again, we'll kind of land with this, I think, if love is a value, it's a potential. And so love is not on or off, it's a muscle. And the more that you choose to love, even when all the evidence or emotion says don't love, you strengthen that muscle. Yeah. You unlock potential. Yeah, and that potential is linked to everything that you hope for and dream for in your life. This is not just about becoming some goody two-shoes. This is absolutely linked to your hopes, your dreams, your destiny, your legacy. And so every time, just like you go to it's easy to love people who love us, but that's like going to the gym and lifting the weights that we used to lift 5 years ago. Like, we know we can lift them, and we may feel like it's doing us a whole lot of good, and that's great, but actually the real muscle is built where there's resistance. Yeah, wherever the relationships where there's resistance when it comes to me choosing to love. And that's where we can start to unlock that value of love and that potential, because love is value. And in this world, the more value you unlock in your life, I believe, the more value you attract to your life.
Really good. I've got a bit of a challenge for everyone to take away. Here's
Challenge.
a good challenge.
We almost need like a bit of music, like no, that's like a fairground.
You just wrecked the challenge.
Sorry,
moment.
yeah. We need a bit more like an emotive music. Challenge.
I reckon everyone today, or if you're listening to this late at night or whatever, tomorrow, the next day, 3 people that you're going to tell them that you love them. And I don't mean like I tell you every day, or you're going to show them. You're going to do something to place value on that person. It might even be somebody that has rubbed you up the wrong way. It could even be an enemy of yours, but you're going to text them and you're going to say, hey, just to let you know I love you. Let's put that on ourselves, not out of pride.
Great challenge.
Not out of I'm better than you, because we're all on a level playing field here. We're all human beings that mess up and make mistakes. But let's put that challenge on ourselves to go and tell 3 people either that you love them or do something that will place value on them.
Fantastic. Well, a great conversation, Mrs. Morgan, and thank you everyone for joining us. We look forward to our next episode, and let's take on that challenge. Let's choose to love from a belief rather than just loving from an emotion. Till next time, take care.
See you soon.
We hope that you enjoyed that episode. And if you enjoyed it, please go and subscribe over on all of our channels on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and not forgetting your favorite podcast platform. And if you head over to thewinninglife.tv, you'll be able to find all the resources available to you. Gareth has written several books which will help you on your discovery to building stronger and better lives. Come and join us for the next episode.